Good chunk. Okay, Lease. Here's a how it's in 1941. How much? So today you want to be writing a lot of notes on your own in your own notebook. I have this outline Barbarossa from last time and a map, but and we did. I don't know how much of that we actually finished, but we finished that. But you need to supplement that with your notebook on some of this. So Lease. Something to remember about not all these figures, but this just to give some sort of perspective how much money was given in that first year. If you what you could do is add 10 figures to that. I mean, at least 300 billion would be today, maybe even 3 trillion, something like that. It could be as much as that. I'm not sure how much, but it was a great deal of money. Valued. They didn't just give money, they gave value. And so this Lend-Lease, why is it called Lend-Lease? Because the United States lent equipment to Britain, and Britain in return leased or gave, both of these are gave, but they leased to the United States islands and ports and territory. So remember the British Empire stretched across the globe, all over Africa and Asia and India and Canada and Australia and all that. Well, there was a lot of strategic spots around the world, especially in the Western Hemisphere, the United States was able to occupy. And so the British essentially left a lot of their empire. They didn't guard it anymore. And the parts that was not being threatened by Japan or Germany or Italy. And so they moved that war material back to Britain to save their country, save the homeland of Britain. And the United States occupied that land. That's what we leased from them. So the United States benefited from the Lend-Lease by getting land, territory from Britain. Britain benefited from us giving them equipment. And what was some of the equipment? At the very beginning, the equipment was ships. That's the United States gave ships at the very beginning.
How was the land useful to the United States?
Well, then what we could do is we could defend the hemisphere even better. It was more cohesive. It wasn't working with another country. So just efficiency, and we were able to, what this whole thing was about is releasing Britain from being spread out. And so we didn't really, like you're insinuating, it's not that much, except that we got to just be a little bit more efficient in our own defense, in this hemisphere. We would give up they give up part of Bermuda, the Bahamas, and British Guyana and stuff. And so we could have our Navy completely right here, and it was just us defending this. Instead of relying on the British and French and the Dutch here too, we controlled all of this. And did we really want that territory? No, but it just made it a cohesive, efficient defense. And what we did was we released the Europeans to go and defend their countries. Now, when France fell, that it was no benefit to them. And the Dutch, when the Netherlands fell, that was no benefit. So we were just able to be a little bit more efficient in our defense. But the main thing is where we were. I'll fast forward through this. We were allowing the British to be released so they could defend Britain, their homeland. Okay, so something to remember about this Lend-Lease is that it started when Britain was alone. So we were trying to help them survive. Unlike Joe Kennedy saying, like, just give up. No matter what you give them, they're going to lose it. And so we gave them ships. They're called destroyers to go after the British, go after the German submarines. And there was hundreds of destroyers. And they were our destroyers. They were actually kind of old. So it allowed us to, in a way, it's sort of a government thing where you say, okay, we've got all these ships, but we need to fight a war eventually. Well, we have all these ships. And so the government, it's hard for them to figure out, like, how do you fight a war with these old ships? But we need new ships. So we have a free market system and a democracy. Do you need to go?
No, you didn't have a question.
Oh yeah. Ask the question.
Oh, it was just when you had the Lease Act.
Yeah.
Did it deal with South Africa or South America? In the slide.
South America. Yeah. So what we're doing is we're making sure that Germany, primarily Germany, is not going to be able to invade that area. See, if we relied on Britain to defend that area against the submarines, well, they won't. They're not much of a defense down, in South America, like, down in here in Central America. If we say, well, British control this area, they're defending it, but they won't be able to defend it that well. So, well, we'll defend it. Well, in international law, it's like, you're not defending us. We're defending us. Well, you're not very good at it. Well, we're not letting you defend us. You got a little problem there. Like, okay, we can't technically defend them because that's their territory. So we're going to watch them fail, and then we'll have to fight them. So instead of Lend-Lease, release the British, and we could occupy and be more efficient. Does that make sense? So, if you're working with your sister or your brother or something, and they're, okay, all of you clean out the garage, and they're a little tot or they don't like to work or something. Oh, great. It'd be better if I just do it myself. You ever been in that situation, like somebody's in there like, yeah, we're helping, and they're piddling, reading the books and stuff. You're not helping. You're not, and then you try to tell them something. No, don't go put it there. Like, what are you telling me? You're not even working. So the best is just get him out, lease me this whole garage, and I'll be in charge of it. And so that was better for everybody. But the main thing is get the British back home and defend their place. The other thing about this really, the question that always comes up is, okay, we were not fighting. The United States was not fighting. We wanted to stay neutral because of those reasons. But we definitely were for Britain. There's no question. We're not for the Nazis. This isn't like World War I where both had kings, weren't sure which one we were going to war. And we've even speculated, like, it wouldn't have been all that bad if Germany had won the World War. So they won. What were they going to do? Have concentration camps? I don't think so. But now this Germany is going to have concentration camps, and they're going to persecute everybody they take over. The Netherlands, Belgium, all of them. Greece, they've rounded up Jews and rounded up gypsies and rounded up Christians and all kinds of people. Anybody that resisted, and they persecuted and tortured them and sadistically, so they're clearly, that's the bad guy. We're going to be against them. And somehow we're going to get into this war. That was really, if you look at the way our government was, the average person did not want to get into the war, even though they were Nazis. And so they had to have a lot of propaganda films and movies that were free. We'd go to watch a movie, and it would be a propaganda film for 30 minutes beforehand. And they just wanted to show, this is what's happening in the war. Here are the good guys, here are the bad guys. And we looked at some of that, the prelude to war and the Nazi strike and all that is just really hyped up yellow journalism. And a lot of it's true, but a lot of it's hyped, And so our government was trying to get the people of our country so we would promote the war. And so our president, especially the president, the Congress not so much, but the president he had a relationship with Winston Churchill. He had a relationship with the King of England, and he was an aristocrat. He was kind of from that world, and he was smart about that we needed the best is to get in there as soon as we can to help and not wait to the end like in World War I, because there might not be a chance to duplicate that. And he had been part of World War I. Franklin Roosevelt, our president, he had been in the government in World War I. He was the assistant secretary of the Navy. And that was, incidentally, the same job that Winston Churchill had in Britain, head of the Navy. And so, in World War I. So they met each other in World War I. And then Franklin Roosevelt ran for president. He was already elected 3 times by this time. So Franklin Roosevelt wanted us to get into the war and was trying to do it without, we couldn't just declare war. They haven't done anything to us. So in a way, we were helping Britain, but in another way, if you could read way into it, we're kind of provoking them to attack us. And because that's what happened in World War I, and we needed to get into the war to help. Otherwise, we're going to be fighting alone against them. And so, and the Japanese. So they could see that the war was coming with Germany. They saw that there was going to be a war with Japan. And about in 1941, of course, that's when the Japanese attacked at the end of the year. But we provoked them as well. And we're going to talk more about that at another time, how we actually provoked. The question that comes up on the Lend-Lease, Q, what's the question? Is how much did the Lend-Lease actually help the Allies win? That's a really good question. And there's still many lectures and research on this, trying to put a quantifiable figure on that. So you can look at how much value was sent. But I think another, but often people don't know how to categorize and how to put in perspective these gigantic trillions of dollars. One thing to remember about the Lend-Lease that will help answer that question is, what did we send them? So Britain got those destroyers at the very beginning, and that allowed them to build less destroyers. They could spend more money Britain could spend more money on airplanes. So they had a plenty of the Navy, but they needed some sort of expendable Navy. Some Navy that's not necessarily the best part that could get hit. They could use them in battles and it wasn't any waste. And also we gave them our surplus ships, really kind of outdated ships that they could use, not in a major warfare moment, but to transport people around the world. And so if you could give, in World War II, if you could give them folders, that would be helpful. Then they won't have to make folders. And they could spend money, they could save $10 not making folders because we gave them all these folders. So they don't have to do folders. And you could give them these Tic Tacs, these mints, and they don't have to have candy. So they spend everything they have on the critical things like the fighter aircraft and the tanks and the guns and the aircraft, things that they can survive with. But if we didn't give them folders and mints, you think, that didn't win it. Everything helps. Everything helps. So when you get to be a little bit older and you start to have a family and you're a baby and you have a family and you're 22 years old or maybe 32 years old and you just got married and you just have a baby and you don't remember those times because you were that little baby. And, your parents remember that. And what happened was your grandparents gave them things. And they gave them things like this. Now, they might have given you big things like cars and things like that, your parents. But they also gave a lot of these things. A lot of things that are just not very much. They bring over some chicken or something, or some hot dogs, or a flag. And they're just giving your parents these things. And you think, okay, that's nice and everything, but that isn't what made us have extra money. Well, yeah, they contributed. Because then you don't have to go buy this. They bought this. You don't have to go there. You don't have to spend $1 for this. And so with $1, every little bit helps with a family that's just starting. And so you remember that when you're siblings are ahead of you and they're married and having children. Remember, just any little thing helps. You don't think about like, oh, what's a really good gift? Just about anything's a good gift when you're just trying to survive. Understand? And so Britain was just trying to survive. And then the Soviet Union was just trying to survive. So every little thing helped. So, but the question is, the way that World War happened was, okay, France got wiped out. All of Western Europe got wiped out. And who was alone? It was Britain. And they had to survive. And so we were giving them whatever we could. But all that stuff really didn't show up until about March of 41. March, May, April of 1941. That's when a lot of it started making its way to Britain in bulk, and lots of it. Food, chips, folders, candy, all kinds of stuff that we just giving them whatever they could, whatever. Sometimes they've done a bunch of shoes, a whole bunch of jackets. Like, who's going to have that? I don't give them to all the poor people. Give them just. You won't have to worry about it. We've got warehouses of just stuff, thrift stores. We gave them like thrift stores. And so they don't have to do thrift stores. So everything goes to use. Okay, but all of that really didn't come until like the spring and summer of 1941. So the question that part of the answer to that big question was, did it help Britain survive? Well, yes, in the long run. But when was the Battle of Britain? Look at your notes. When was the Battle of Britain? Look at your notes and get it specific. That's like July, August, July through October 1940. That's when we needed to help them. And we hardly helped them then. We wanted to help them. We hadn't geared up for it yet. We didn't know that France was going to fall. We didn't know the stock market in the United States was the worst fall probably in all of our history, was when France fell. Oh, God. In the United States, we're messed up. We didn't even know that we were going to help Britain. And half of our government wasn't sure about it. So the question is, did the Lend-Lease help? A lot did it help. But did it help them actually survive? Well, broadly, yes. But when they really needed it, when they were on their own fighting the RAF against the Luftwaffe, were we sending in things then? No. Okay. In other words, they survived on their own. They really were alone. Now, we were sympathetic to them, and we definitely were cheering them on. But in terms of material goods, we really did not help them that much. Until 41, 42, and then it really kicked in. Yeah.
Does that include private help?
Private help?
Like from individuals and stuff like that? Because I'm guessing there was certainly private.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody did something like the Rockefellers. And, yeah.
Okay.
Now, there was a lot of already invested in Britain, in their stock market, and they had factories that were American-owned. There was a lot that was in there. Now, a lot of that's where the government was advising, maybe you should just close your factory because the Nazis are going to be taking over. So people personally had to make decisions. It's a good question. I don't know the specific answer to that, but I would say I'm sure people were helping. And it was at this time that Canadians, I know they're not Americans, but they act completely like Americans, even back in those times. Canadians went and volunteered and went to Britain to join the army and join the Air Force and the Navy. And so some Canadians fought in the Battle of Britain. A lot of people mistakenly thought of those as Americans. And so sometimes you'll see a movie, and it's an American accent totally, and he's in the British Air Force RAF, but there's no Americans in that. And then those are the Canadians. So that really was. But the Americans didn't do that. There probably were some Americans that actually did that. That would be a good research. I'd like to do that. I've heard that happened. But anyway, Canada was part of the British Empire, so it wasn't that ordinary that they did that. Okay, the other question is, okay, what about Soviet Union? when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. So we extended the Lease from Britain to the Soviet Union. And so 1/3 of what we gave to Britain, we gave to the Soviet Union in 1941. But most of that did not actually, it got readied and spent and ready to ship, but it did not even get to the Soviet Union until the early part, really the spring and summer of 1942. So again, it's key to remember is that the Soviet Union, we're going to look at Barbarossa, and that this is the significant point of World War II, is the Russians were able to hold Moscow and Leningrad and hold most of the key points just when they needed to, and they were on their own also. Yeah.
We had fear in the United States, and was there a much of a fear at the time possibly that during World War during that time?
As up until 1941, communism, definitely there was a fear of that. And that was an enemy, a rival that just don't identify with that. The government of the United States did not even acknowledge that that's a legitimate government.
Did that affect how they worked with the Soviet Union during World War II?
Well, so the government, fortunately, the government can just make a change. They can just make a policy change. Franklin Roosevelt, many people call him smart, and most of us agree with that he had smarts, not technical smarts, but he could just common sense smart. What do we do? The Nazis are the problem. We're going to support whoever fights them. I know there's communists, I know all the bad part of that, but I support them. And that took some good common sense instead of an ideologue, somebody. Even Churchill changed. He's an anti-communist figure of all time, and he supported the Soviet Union against the Nazis. But the average person did not see it like that. But our government was able to teach, propagandize, and teach, and I think that's really what happened. And so they put into those propaganda films that the Soviet Union was attacked, and they stopped talking about how bad the Soviet Union was, and they just look at them as like they went after Norway and Belgium and the Netherlands and France and Britain and Russia. And they call it Russia. They don't want to say the Soviet Union or communism or anything. Now it's Russia. Oh, Russia. They don't even call themselves Russia. Oh, now they will. And so Stalin changed it from Soviet Union to Russia for the time being. So we went along with it and started giving him nicknames instead of the butcher, the tormentor of Russians. He's Stalin, Uncle Joe, and stuff like that. Trying to get some public opinion behind the war. And if we're supporting with the Lease, Britain is easy to understand. So now we're supporting Russia. It's a stretch. But our government was going to do it no matter what. So we have a big government. And this is kind of what we're dealing with even today, 2021. We had to fight that war, and we were determined to help Britain and determined to help the Soviet Union. And we were so determined that our government got enormous. Everybody just realized, you have to fight. You can't fight with a teeny army. You got to have a big navy and an army and a lot of money. How are you going to get that? You're going to tax, you're going to spend, you're going to borrow money, and everybody's got to do it. We're going to draft everybody. We're going to make people work so long, and you're going to get paid this much. And if you have babies, you can put the babies in daycare, and you go to work. And the government's going to control the daycare, and you're going to go to work. And we promise that you're going to get paid this much, and it's going to be good. It's a minimum wage. This is where all this ideas came from. And it served its purpose because we were in a crisis. We'll fast forward 70 years to our time. We still have all of those in place, and they're not really needed. But the government huge still. And we have bodyguards for our congressmen. And we have an army and a navy and an air force. It's enormous in the amount of money. And the government is controlling a lot of our health care and welfare. We're paying people not to work. We're paying people to go into retirement. It's enormous. So the government can dictate how we do our health policies and things like that, and people have to obey. It seems like, and so. So that's the problem. That's a different clash, really. But that is a problem. Something that we had to do, but yet there's a drawback to it. There's always a drawback when you say, let's make the government bigger. The government ought to do that. Whenever you say that, and I've said it as much as anybody, they ought to be doing that. Oh, you want to give them that power? Okay, if you give them that power, then they get this and this and this and this and this and that power. You can't just have one power. If you give your older sister, okay, you're in charge of the cleanup down in the garage. So that's all it is? Because the older sister or older brother or somebody hears something different. I'm in charge of the cleanup in the garage. But they heard I'm in charge of every single thing that we're about to do. And the cookies and everything. What were you going to say, somebody? Okay, so the big question, did it help? Obviously, it helped a lot. And it was better on the long term, the Lend-Lease, than it was in the short term. Which maybe that's obvious, but Britain held without our help, really, when they needed it. And the Soviet Union fought for 4 years on a land battle, 4-year land battle across Europe, across right here, and they beat Germany. But the thing is, they probably couldn't have done that in 4 years. They probably would have taken 5 or 6 without our help. But really, the key, that's the speculation I've ever said in my life. What would you? So what if we didn't give them the Soviets? One, I think they still would have survived, and the war would have lasted a lot longer. Did it help? It definitely helped, and every Russian knows what. Unlike what most Americans have no oblivious of what happened with Russia. You just ask the average person, the average 70-year-old or 50-year-old. Tell me about World War II. Who was our allies? Britain. You might get up, France, you might even say Russia, but what did they do? Well, they helped us. They fought the war, is what they did. They fought the land war. I don't know what, we talked about this. What would the United States have done against all these blue advances? We had our army fighting against all of these blue streaks, arrows. Russians fought against all that. So at the most that we ever fought against was like one of these, not 100 of them. So the most we ever fought against the Germans, straight up, U.S., it was like 1 or 2 divisions instead of 100. So here's the thing: the Soviets did not get our help when they needed it the most. Not because we didn't want to; it's just hard to get to Russia, hard to gear up. What do we send them? Trucks, food, shoes, boots. And so just as a perspective, I'm going to give you a real broad stroke here, but you should jot this down. In the war, in like 1943, just the middle years, 1943, the United States sent, I'm going to guess here, I'm within 10%. I would say they sent 200,000 trucks. 200,000 trucks to the Soviet Union. From 4-year war. So that's what we contributed, what we gave to the Soviet Union, just trucks, 200,000 trucks. It could be 250,000. And that's a lot. In 4 years, the Soviet Union produced on their own probably 50,000 in 4 years. In other words, 12, 12, 12, 12, 50,000. We gave them 200,000. Did we give them a lot of trucks? Yeah, we gave them a ton of trucks. Not to be funny. Okay, so, and that was a critical thing. Boots. They produced, let's say they produced 100 boots. And let's say that's like a billion, 100 billion, something like that. We gave them in 1 year 5 times that. So the Soviet Union was not a major producer of boots and food and trucks in the first place. So we gave them things that they were not really good at. So those boots, if they didn't have American boots, those people were fighting 4 years, American 4 years, American truck, eating American food. We didn't send them tanks. I mean, maybe a few. We didn't send them airplanes, maybe a few. They made those. So it freed up the factories and to concentrate on what they really need. We gave them their surplus. But that's a crucial thing. There was a every year you can see a survey like this in every country. Survey, somebody does a poll thing. Could the United States have won World War II without the Russians' help? Russians did not help at all. Could we have beat Nazis? Of course, we beat Japan without Russian help. Yeah, but could they have done it? Could they have, gone to Berlin?
Would Russia have?
No, U.S.
Oh.
Would the U.S. have? They would have had a two-front war. It would have to have been a two-front. But what if Russia had been just stayed neutral? It wasn't this. It wasn't this. It wasn't the Barbarossa. Russia just somehow was always friendly with the Nazis.
What were the types of divisions sent to Russia?
Like everything. What types? Land and air, all of them. So, we would have to face this in an amphibious attack. It would have been impossible without nuclear weapons. We wouldn't even try.
There would have also probably been a lot of propaganda from the Russians, if the United States for Russia's help.
Yeah, I mean the Soviets could have done all kinds of mischief. But what if this had been successful and knocked them out and they were slaves now? Well, they could turn all of these hundreds of divisions and defend the rest of Europe. And start thinking of really getting Egypt. Instead of sending 2 divisions from Germany and taking all of Africa, they could have put 20 divisions down there. And then Suez is gone. But they almost got it with 2 divisions. The whole British army down. The whole British army to deal with 2 plus an battalion. But what if you free up this and went here? Well, you're going to get Suez. And you're going to get the Middle East, the oil. And now you're just, all of it, that's just the first one. That's definitely doable. They got to, you can see down here, they got down almost to Turkey and Caspian Sea. And they weren't even trying to get that. So, we're speculating, but there is a survey that comes out, maybe once a year. You can see it on the internet. But there's also the same thing is asked of Russians every year, because this is the Great Patriotic War. This is their thing. Of course, World War II is a big thing here in the United States, but it's not the Patriotic War. It's not the Great Patriotic War. So, the same question was, do you think the Soviet Union would have won that war, won this war, without the U.S. help? And there's 87% usually. Last time I looked, 87% of Russians say it would be. And for you to be educated on that is trying to figure it out. I think from our standpoint, I don't think we could have won, not without nuclear weapons. Not way of point. We get into Berlin and they surrender like that against hundreds of divisions. We're gonna study that. But I think on the other hand, the Russians had a better chance of doing that without nuclear weapons because they practically did it. They held on their own. They won the Battle of Moscow on their own. They won the Battle of Stalingrad on their own. Tanks against the best that the Germans had. Now, the Germans had a ton of mistakes. The Americans were helping them. Yeah.
Well, one of the things is also, if Germany had, would Germany, if the United States had not intervened late into the war, would Germany have been able to put more divisions in during the summertime into Russia, therefore causing Russia to fall?
Yeah, a lot of give and take scenarios. Yeah, I mean, those are all things to. So what we're going to be doing is getting educated on what this Barbarossa was, and now today, what I want to draw your attention to, we talked about the very beginning of it, going through what we've already talked about. That's the two divisions in North Africa. Got to El Alamein. Now the British were, that was just a one-on-one British against the Germans. At first it was the Italians. Talked about Crete. So Barbarossa, not just to step back, just in case you're a tiny bit confused, Leningrad is what St. Petersburg was. You know, originally it was called St. Petersburg, what we've learned. And they renamed it Petrograd during the revolution, the Russian Revolution. So it was Petrograd, which is more of a Russian-sounding Peter, not Petersburg, which is German-sounding. They made it sound Russian. Petrograd, which just means Petersburg. And then after Lenin died in 1924, they renamed Petrograd Leningrad after Lenin. Okay. Well, nowadays they've reverted back to the Petersburg. Just so you know, don't get confused. Don't get that confused also with down here it's going to be Stalingrad, which is no longer a city, but that was named after Stalin. Leningrad's in the north, Stalingrad's in the south. Ms. Jones?
I was just about to ask if Stalingrad was.
Yeah, a lot of people make that mistake, and both of them are great battles. What I'm saying is like very important battles. Leningrad was a siege. Okay, last time, so in your notes, what I want you to have is something, maybe you could just title it like The Third Reich. Just going to talk about the Holocaust and just how they managed, how did the Germans actually pull off or try, they didn't really pull off, but they pulled off some of what they intended to do. And lots of books that are, I know that you guys are doing a lot of schoolwork and a lot of reading and things, but I would give you extra credit if you, again, take something on Germany, also some more Soviet things from this era, and just read some and summarize it. And you will thank yourself. Get extra credit, but you will be educating yourself. There's nothing like having a hard copy, as long as you have good eyes, and hard copy, and you have some time, and just read something scholarly. I know the internet, and I'm pointing you to scholarly things, but sometimes it sort of gives you bad habits. Okay, so we talked about how the Germans their whole plan was to occupy the eastern part of Europe. That goes back to Mein Kampf, and that goes back to the racial policy. That's where the settlement of the Germans, the original German speakers were, and in the south, down by the Crimea and Ukraine, and also in the Baltic countries, and also right in here in the middle is Belarus. And so a lot of that's true, but it's kind of like saying, I don't know, it's a little mythical. Were there German speakers down here at some point? Yes, in medieval times. It was a long time ago. Are they ethnic Germans? Well, yeah, but they've been mixing. It's not like they've been staying ethnic German. It's like, am I ethnic Irish? My name's Downey, and some of my people, St. Patrick, but I have just as many Germans and Russians and Jewish people and who knows what in my background. But you're Irish, right? Because of Downey. You want to go live in Ireland? I mean, I sort of kind of do want to live in Ireland, but only because it has nothing to do with like my ethnicity. I love that country. It's the coolest country. I don't really, when I get there, I couldn't pull it off. But maybe a year of my life, I'd like to do that because it's so easy to live there. And they're like Alabama people, and they're real friendly, and they speak English. They drink a lot. But not, anyway, I don't mind being around people like that. So, but it's just, so, am I ethnic? Do I think that all of us Irish people should want to go back to Ireland? I don't really follow that kind of line. Or anybody that's American, French, or Mexicans, that whole thing. So it's kind of a stretch, but he pulled it off and propagandized it, and people sort of played along with it, and it was a nightmare, and people just played along with a nightmare. And so the thing to remember about Barbarossa, the thing to remember about this whole gigantic episode of World War II is on the European part of it. Remember, it's Hitler. This is Hitler's thing. And all those other countries were not really doing it. And they had to participate. But it's Hitler's idea. It goes back to Mein Kampf. Go into the East. Everybody knows that. Hitler's the bad guy. Okay. And you think about all his mistakes and things. We're bringing that up. A lot of people say he should never have attacked Russia. And we've talked about this. But remember, it's kind of like saying, you know what Hitler's mistake was? He was crazy. Well, okay, that's what all of our problems are, is you're kind of crazy for a moment. We should never have done that. But you understand that Hitler, his whole being is this. That's what he was, is we have to go after, we've got to reunite all the Germans. And we have to go into the East. And we're going to kill Jews. If he doesn't have those, he's a nobody. And we would have all been better off if he had lost one of those three concepts. All of them. And so, but he's crazy, and we got to go into Eastern Europe, and he hates Jews and the Slavs that live there, and we're going to eliminate them. So by 1943, the thing that we've been concentrating on, the war part, he had lost. The tanks and the airplanes and everything, the Germans were losing. And he knew it, and everybody could see it. And when was it going to be over? We didn't know, but we were going to win. The early part of 1943, definitely, like 100% of it, it's over by July of 1943. In other words, we got almost 2 years left, and it was just a matter of time. But up until then, we had a chance. They had a slight chance. Now, in 41, they had a good chance. In 42, they had a decent chance. In 43 is a long shot, but by the halfway through 43, there's no chance. None. Even with a nuclear weapon, they probably couldn't. Okay. So that's point one. Is by 1943, Hitler had failed. However, he had succeeded. By 1943, most of the Jews of Europe had been eliminated. They had conquered this land and had basically destroyed all the Jews. Do you understand? So there's two things going on with Hitler. We're going to have to fight France and Britain and Russia, but really they're fighting the Jews. Don't ever forget that. That's a hard concept to wrestle with. You don't want to wrestle with it. It's so nasty. But there's two things that you always have to remember. So whenever someone says he shouldn't have attacked Russia, are you kidding? That's what brought him success. He's a crazy maniac, and he's trying to kill Jews. Where are the Jews? They're in Eastern Europe. Did he kill a lot? A ton, almost all of them. He's successful. That's why at the end of the war, they're just continuing to kill Jews. You know, the ones that are left in those concentration camps, they're gassing them and then burning them. That is the war. You understand? And the only way that he could have done that war that basically took place here is you had to extend the borders to there. If you're fighting right here, you can't kill Jews because you're fighting with tanks and things. So you have to send the tanks and the air and the army that way east, and back here you're killing Jews. You understand? It's like taking a bank. You take over a bank and you are holding people hostage, but over there they're stealing the money. The money is the thing. It's not the hostages. It's not the police. You're getting money. And so the money is the Jews. Kill the Jews. So remember that. Huh? You guys have notes on this. The German objectives: Stalingrad, Moscow, and Ukraine. And you guys read about this. We talked about how the Germans showed their preparations, and the Soviets turned a blind eye for various reasons. He was trying to appease Hitler, and Hitler did well when he allowed the German generals to make policy, and he just kind of oversaw it. And he did badly after the Moscow defeat, because then he took over the reins of every day-to-day, every minute-by-minute decision. You guys looked at the Soviet advantages, and that they theoretically were very well prepared and pretty well led by Zhukov especially. We looked at some other advantages about their concepts of deep battle and multi-layered defenses. You guys wrote this down, and that it comes from their losses through the early part of the century. Should they be on the offensive? And most people will acknowledge this was a mistake. Long term, it was not a mistake, but short term, that was a mistake. They thought the way to win a big war is you have to be offensive, and that is true. For World War II, you have to have major offensive thrust. And that's why I say that the Americans would not have been able to defeat Germany. We did not really know how to do this. Our best thing was logistics. That's still our thing. We are so good at business and so good at logistics. You just put somebody like, you go do that. And UPS does it. And Amazon does it. How do they get something in one day? Like, because there's money, that's an American way of doing it. But how do you conquer a foreign country? We're not very good at that. We're pretty good against that in Mexico, but that was a long time ago, 150 years ago. I mean, Mexico is not the Nazi Germany, you know. So that was a mistake. The Red Army was they were questioning rightly, but they did say you got to have really good defense, but the main thing is offense. And so that's how they won World War II. They had they knew about the deep defense, but they also knew about the deep offense. The United States was oblivious to this until 1943. We were oblivious. So were the British. So the French never had won that. And the Soviets were ahead of everybody. And even the Germans did not understand this. They learned it by the end of the war, and so the Germans on land, the Germans and the Soviets were the best. In the air, you might say the Americans, and the Navy is, British and the Americans. So, but on land, and that's what the Russian war was about, the Barbarossa. Defense in depth. Armies, this is the Southwest Front in the Ukraine. You can just see how many armies that the Germans were going to have to defeat. And they were able to do that because they had surprise at the very beginning. Okay, another big disadvantage the Soviets had, though, and all those advantages, they had a fundamental disadvantage, and that is that Stalin was also crazy. But he wasn't so mad and crazy as Hitler. He was bloodthirsty like Hitler, but he didn't kill every single person that could have helped him. But he did kill a lot of people where it became a disadvantage. 3 of the top 5 of the army he murdered. And right before the war, too. And so he feared somebody like Tukhachevsky. He feared him more than Hitler. And that's crazy. Well, that's what you have with a totalitarian government. Try to get me? So the Great Purge. So what we're going to do is you want to turn in your notebook to another section. Put the Soviet Purge. This is another. We're going to come back and forth between the Third Reich and the Holocaust and the Soviets, which is another form of Holocaust.
Hey, your mic's on. Good job.
Awesome. I wanted to dance for a second. I was thinking, I was like, I didn't think this was good. Right with this slide. That's the Great Purge music. Okay, we talked about this, how these people were purged. Purged means eliminated. In Russian, it's really clean. They call it cleaned out. And so that's where we get that word purge. Like, they were pruned, purged. They were murdered with a gun. And their blood was written on a confession and stuff like that. So crazy. So these are the people at the very top. These are the very top of the army, the very top of the government were eliminated. They had show trials that they filmed, and you can see some of these. Go on YouTube and say show trials 1937. You can see it, and it's just a farce. It's a trial with all lawyers and everything, and people who are convicted, but it's just all staged, and there's false witnesses saying, "Oh no, he's an American spy. I saw him, and I heard him speaking how great capitalism was." And this is people at the top of the Soviet system. They knew that the Russian way of doing this was just, you just don't say anything. Maybe if you confess, which almost all of them confess, if they confess, I confess that I'm an American spy. What they were hoping is that their family would somehow live by confessing. So thousands of people confessed. Dramatic evidence, in other words, it's just all made up. Like, and he came into the room and he pulled off his wig and he had an American flag there. It's just really stupid. So there was some in 1933, 34, 35, 36, 30. The big ones were 37 and 38. Military show trials were 37 that were not publicized, and that's where they got rid of a lot of army officers. Moscow show trials. So this guy, here's what this Zinoviev, this is in the top, this is like, the vice president of the country. He got arrested, and they're taking a picture, and then they're negotiating. This is right before that. He's like, so stupid. I can't believe that guy I was killing people yesterday, and now you got him. This is Zinoviev. That's this guy, all right? He's happy there. He's happy being the killer. Now he's sad being the kill lead, whatever you call that. The kill lead. The kill. So Zinoviev. You think, I'm not going to write that. He said that 20 times in this class, but I will not write it. You should write it. Zinoviev. Why not? Well, what are you, not very smart? Zinoviev. D-I-N-O-V-I-V. In the government. Yeah, he's a top. This is, remember, Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, Zinoviev, Bukharin, Kamenev, the top people that did the revolution. There he is. Zinoviev. Z-I-N.
Detroit Soviet Purge. Okay.
Pointed out a B.
B is a V. A B is a V. That's why sometimes you see the wrong spelling. Sometimes you see something. You thought it was Sevastopol, but on the map, look at on that map. That's Sevastopol. I noticed the B. I don't know what those other letters are, but I can see the Z, and I can see the H, and I can see the O, and I can see the B, and I can see the E. Those aren't those letters. Second show trial. Just know there are show trials, and know what those were. Here's Israel Pleener, Jewish guy, obviously. He was the head of the Gulag. Now, what is Gulag? Who is my Gulag archipelago?
That's for Lease.
The Gulag is the concentration camps where people are sent to die in Siberia, mainly in Siberia. They are sent to work and they never come back. The Gulag. Here's the head of the Gulag. He's executed. Just like the French Revolution, just like all totalitarianism. And they knew one day it would come to them. But they're hoping maybe somebody would get to Stalin and say, "Oh, don't kill Pleener." But they don't know that Stalin is the one who said he sent the warrant to kill Zinoviev. A lot of people in our society might hope like that one day. But what they do is they hope, you think, Stalin, he's strong. He's strong. He loves our country. He has to kill people that are enemies. How else do you rule Russia? How else do you do it? You have to be strong. And so, he took my mother? Well, that couldn't have been Stalin. My mother didn't do anything. But then, wait, they're telling me they only take people that did things. Did mother? Was she bad? Yes, she was. Yes, I guess she was. I can't believe it, but you know she didn't. And you say, look, I know she wasn't. She was totally communist. She gave you a Bible, not a Bible story, but a Communist Manifesto story every night. And she read it. She said the communism is awesome. And they prayed for Stalin every single night. And then they got her, and you know that she didn't do anything. She's a communist. And they're saying she's a capitalist. She's bourgeois. She's a spy for the Americans. This is wrong. And so you go, and your neighbors and your friends will say, don't do it. They'll get you too. And you're like, sure. They got your mother. You don't even talk to that person anymore. They got your mother. Pam was taken. You don't know. All her friends are gone. Anna has no more friends because she was taken. All her friends just fall apart because they don't want to be taken. If you say, like, she didn't do anything. Okay, you know her? You're in the line too. And you don't come back. And so everybody's quiet. So that's what totalitarianism does. It wasn't just the Nazis. The Soviets perfected it. And they're still, they never did fall apart. So, I shouldn't say never. They eventually did. It took a lot longer. So what do? So you appeal. Somebody would appeal. Like, you're the one daughter who knows that your mother was a good communist. And so you appeal and you say, you know what? It's because Stalin doesn't know. Someone else got her. But if Stalin knew, he would forgive her. You understand? That was the farce that was going on in the Soviet Union. People thought that Stalin was the good guy. He was the authority that he couldn't control all the bad killers.
It's kind of concerning that you have that kind of trust in your government.
Yeah.
not understanding question
Yeah.
what's happening to you believers.
Yeah. Okay, so do good work on the Holocaust. I'll have some an assignment that you won't have to rush to do it, but just do it about in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Downs.
You are so
I'm
welcome.
gonna reassign that Hitler bonus, whatever thing,
Yeah.
because it disappeared.
Oh,